Does Nebraska football have the resources to consistently be at the level James Franklin has had Penn State at? Which program represents a realistic ceiling for Nebraska?
What's like the comp? That's a good question.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't. So many of these questions about this are about the NIL kitty, and I just don't know, Josh. Like we hear things, but
Can't
that's
say
what it
definitively.
is. Like I don't know.
Can't say definitively.
I don't know. I wish there are people who know that stuff better than I do, probably.
Yeah,
But
Penn
like,
State is definitely not the comp to be like aiming for. Who is the program? Who's
in the
realistic
conference?
Who's the? I don't know. You can go anywhere, I guess. Who's the realistic team to aim for?
I was gonna say like, oh man, this is gonna be depressing if I say what I'm thinking. Well,
Wisconsin.
Yeah. I was gonna almost say Michigan State, but like, you know,
that's depressing.
Wisconsin. Like I feel like the ceiling's higher actually than like Kansas State.
That'd be nice.
Or Iowa State. Like I do feel like the ceiling is higher than those.
Yeah,
right.
The harder part is that you're in the Big Ten.
You know, it's weird. Like it feels like the ceiling is higher than those, but on the other hand, you could see Kansas State or Iowa State going a run to the semifinals of the playoff.
Definitely, yeah.
Like this year, you could have seen that.
Yeah, Jack, isn't it wild to say like Arizona State was a 4th and 13 stop away from making it to the semis. Arizona State was, so it's like, why can't that be the ceiling? You know?
Yeah.
Now it's also in an era of the playoff that is going to change rapidly within the next couple of years. Like they're not going to have that same format that would allow you just to win one game.
Yeah, I don't know. Like it's like that second tier, like Wisconsin, Oklahoma State. I don't know.
So, you know, Jack, one of the things that you've often talked about is like the younger generation finally getting to enjoy a season again, like what that would mean.
Mm-hmm.
But so like on top of that, what would that mean for like recruiting? Like, could they're already a really good recruiter. Could they parlay a 10-2 season into like being like a really, really good recruiter? You know, where suddenly their ceiling is risen? Because right now we're talking about this in generalities because we have to conjure up what that would even look like if they were good again. But if they had consistent 8-9 win seasons, could their ceiling would rise in theory?
Right. Like I wouldn't happen. It's just this weird thing because I've had for how many years you've been like Nebraska is no longer in the class where they can be contenders, right, for the national championship. On the other side, on the other hand, I should say, those teams I mentioned, like again, Iowa State, Kansas State, you could see them going to the semifinals of the playoff right now.
Yeah.
And maybe that's inaccurate, but as you said, Arizona State almost did. Now, if they change the seeding, that might
it's going to be hard
affect that a little bit, but
yeah.
But there's a handful of like second tier schools that I think in your mind it wouldn't be that crazy to say, yeah, they could make it there. Mm-hmm. But yet we sort of think of Nebraska as having more potential or more resources than those schools at very least, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Michigan State. I'm trying to think of Michigan State, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Iowa
Certainly
State.
A fan base.
I don't know who else.
More.
I don't know if anyone in the SEC could be that. Probably, you know, like I don't know. That's kind of hard. If there's not an SEC team that fits in that whole group that I'm talking about there.
With the recruiting component is always such like a difficult part for these discussions, you know, like how it hurts Nebraska and it can help a myriad of SEC schools just kind of make their lives easier. D'Lo says Nebraska needs 10-2 at worst for any playoff chance.
Because it's just harder to get in the playoff is what he's saying.
Yeah, 100%.
That's 100%. True too. That factors in.
Yeah.
That factors in. But again, you like think about it. Michigan State freaking made the 14 playoff.
Yeah, they did. They did, which seems like 100 years ago, and yet it was not even a decade ago when they did that.
Yeah.
Isn't that wild to think about? Like, I can't imagine Michigan State making it today. And they did it.
Right.
They were like,
they did it. Like it happens.
They were good.
Dude, it happens with team after team after team after team. Like we've been told so many times Nebraska will never be at a level for doing that. Well, other teams, now, did they get there in the postseason once the games happened? No, that Michigan State team got their ass handed to them by Alabama. But,
yeah,
I mean, like just getting there, being able to start to get there is would be a major step. Like if you're making the playoff multiple times, it feels like you're in that group of teams that can win it. And especially that this year seemed to indicate that there's going to be more parity going forward. Like how much do you think the sport has changed in terms of parity?
I think it's changed a lot
because of the playoff, whatever else, NIL, transfer portal, all of those things.
It's flattened the
but
sport.
Seeing like it really, like you would have said, I'm sure you've talked about this on the air multiple times over the last 10 years, but is your answer now different about what Nebraska's ceiling could be in the sport than it would have been 5 years ago?
Yeah, I think it's probably changed. I mean, it also helps massively that you do have a 12-team playoff, because for a while it was like, well, they're never going to make the playoff. That's an impossibility. Now, I absolutely think they could. They just have to get out of their own way. You know, like people are bringing up Indiana. Yeah. Matt brought up Washington as an interesting
Washington is another one. They got the
less
championship,
but higher ceiling. Yeah, it's like, come on.
Like from what I've seen, the things we brought up: Michigan State, Washington, Indiana, Arizona State. Yeah. Iowa State and Kansas State, like hypothetically.
They were in the mix. BYU was in the mix.
Josh,
Colorado was
BYU,
in the mix this year.
We're saying that stuff. And I understand, again, what D'Lo said about the Big Ten, but Indiana, Michigan State, Penn State. There's no reason anymore to feel hopeless about this other than everything they do sucks. But like there's no
how they act
if
on
they
the field.
if somehow they ever stopped sucking at all that stuff, I don't think there's any reason to feel hopeless about the chances of being a player and like getting now you're 2 games away, right? From the national championship. Somebody gets a bad injury or whatever, you know.
Well, hell, Jack, I mean,
it's a more hopeful situation than it's been in a long time.
And I know, look, this is way higher end, but I, for the longest time, thought Notre Dame's place in the sport was kind of dumb.
Notre Dame.
And now they're back in the championship game, and on their way, they beat an SEC champion, you know. Right. They're playing for a national title on Monday. So I think the sport's changed immensely.
SMU, you know?
Yeah, SMU's in the playoff.
They've got their own, you know, money situation that Miami